Eh. So, movie war Full Throttle. Yeah, I said I was going to do a separate vlog on it, and this is it. So, I liked it a lot. I think I pretty much said the same thing on Twitter about a month ago when the movie first hit home video and we first got the Raw. I watched the Gaim Drive and Full Throttle team up portions then, and pretty much what I said then was I really liked Gaim's portion, I didn't like Drive's portion, and the team up portion was really lackluster. And I can revise that opinion now a bit from the full context of the scenes. Granted, I did the overtime thing because I thought it was about time, since I think one or two other newbie fansub groups tried to do it, and I checked them out. I really didn't like their methodology for doing that. It was following TV Izier's kind of thing with the show, which I really didn't like because I found it wildly inaccurate to what was actually translatable through the lines. Granted, most of their stuff matched up with Google Translate, and I don't care how much it's improved. Google Translate is still bottom of the barrels for automated translation stuff. You kind of need to go through it yourself. So, I was personally a bit wary about overtime doing it, since they kind of skipped Gaim entirely and just went to Drive. I don't know why. Maybe they just wanted to be a bit more lax last year. I mean, pretty much what I do is I do overtime first if it's like by a certain window. Otherwise I use TV Nihon, and TV Nihon's the one I save and stockpile because personally I feel they do a bit better. I feel they are more accurate while allowing it to flow together. Yeah, they have a lot of errors. They're usually good about fixing those these days, or at the very least acknowledging them, which is an issue I find for some other groups which prefer to do the localization thing. But again, that's just my preference. I don't want to get into the whole fansub preference words thing, which pops up any time someone says something about their fansub preferences. Overtime's not a bad group. They're a good group. I just have nitpicky issues. So getting to the movie itself, Gaim's portion really was kind of follow-up on the whole Helheim stuff, which obviously that was kind of the draw there, because how could you have a Gaim movie after everything with the Helheim had concluded? Well, it was showing a new, not exactly new, a previous victim of the Helheim and what their planet did to avoid becoming mindless beasts subsumed by the Helheim's will. And they went the technological, we will turn ourselves into amalgamated intelligence idea. Now, pretty much every fictional work that does this does the same thing. It makes them the villain versus showing the powers of teamwork and individuality pushing themselves farther to defeat this amalgamation that, while seeming extremely overpowerful, is not always as so adaptive. We're big on this. The Borg, the Cybermen, the robots from the Matrix to a certain extent, the Geth from Mass Effect. God, so many of these I've reviewed or in the process of reviewing, or someone else has reviewed. But yeah, we as a people, because that's kind of the dichotomy of our race, in that we seek out connections to not be alone, but we don't want to be subsumed so our own individuality is lost. I swear, if this was not coming off the top of my head, I could put this in better. I could phrase this better, but yeah, this shows up all over fiction, especially science fiction works. Ooh, The Thing. The Thing is another good one. Really need to get a copy of that movie. But yeah, it comes to the Helheim planet, which is honestly looking like Eden. Like the mythological Eden to paradise. It's looking very good in the care of Kota and Mai, who don't seem to be they seem to be being good stewards of the Helheim versus Roshuo, who kind of just gave up after his wife died, and the whole false gold what was his name? Kogami kind of turned every one of their forces rampant. So it's kind of a contrast between despair, just living with it, and being responsible for it. Now, the end of the movie had, when I originally watched it, implied, watched it raw, implied that Kota and Mai were just going to abandon their duties to be with their loved ones. But I'm glad once I get the full context of what they're saying, that is not the case. They are there, but they're not there. Let me rephrase. They're going to say their farewells. They're not leaving without warning. They might be commuting. I mean, that would make sense for the next time Gaim appears in something, in that he comes when I have to go, my planet needs me, kind of thing. Love that line. So it's still building the, it's still being responsible about the Helheim, allowing it to do its nefarious job, but it's not running rampant. Yes, no. Again, phrasing badly. But then in comes Megahex, and he's pretty much assimilates portions of the planet, which honestly built the previous mentioned context that the Helheim planet is dead, so they didn't need to go back or something. But no, undone after it's dead, and it honestly puts up a very good fight, reflective of the experience the Megahex has to have with assimilating and amalgamating planets, the whole group consciousness that accumulate knowledge of innumerable worlds to get its own Overlord champion. So the Battle of Overlords is actually pretty good. One that Kota only loses because Megahex can copy itself, like reproduce itself from digital existence, matter conversion kind of thing. And that's how we get back the Kurokage troopers, the Invests, and Ryoma Sengoku. Ryoma's part, I want that face mask, I do. In fact, after I'm done filming this, I'm going to get started on building my own Sonic Arrow. Yes, someone actually made a papercraft thing out of this, and I am going to build it, and it will be glorious. Yes. Technically, I'm building it twice, but still. Anyways, yeah, I really liked Ryoma in this as well. Not just because, he doesn't have the context to being a magnificent bastard, but, this is kind of what he wanted. He became a god by being part of this greater intelligence that has so much accumulated knowledge, which is another thing he's been big on. And, one of the things, Takatora Bata does when he's, fighting him is pointing out how he gave himself up to this kind of thing when previously a buildable context to the guy is he's so egocentric with his genius that he only really got mad with Kota once he started using Kachidoki and Kiwami, as those were not his inventions. The energy lock seeds are his inventions, his upgrades to the generic Helheim fruits. They were his creations. So, all of the Jimba combinations of the arms, that was still innovation with the Sengoku driver, and his conversion of the Helheim fruits into the lock seeds. So all still his work was giving him power. Kachidoki and Kiwami, on the other hand, those were created or recreated by Helheim's power, by Kota's own power once he started becoming an overlord. Remember, the Kachidoki Lockseed broke at one point and Kota reformed it. So that's when he kind of snapped on that, because now it's no longer controllable by his machinations, no longer getting himself out of the way. So, and then he can't. even, I guess it's more, he's sharing godlike power equally in this movie. And with all the knowledge, he's sated with trying to learn everything. So, unlimited knowledge. Unlimited power! Or something along those lines, is what I kept getting from it. And yeah, Kota dies in this before Ryoma makes his appearance. How Megahex recreated Ryoma, how he created... Well, yeah, how he recreated Ryoma and Kaito, that's a question in and of itself, considering he got the data for the Sengoku drivers and all the other Gaim rider gears from Kota's memories, from a forcible taking of everything so it could understand its language and the people it was going to conquer. Reading Kota's mind is also how he got the knowledge of where Earth is, so oops. But yeah, it becomes a minor plot hole of how he knew about how the people he's recreating are actually have all this knowledge of the real people. I mean, it makes it interesting for the audience to have these characters actually back and not being like drones with their faces, and allows for, you know, last minute character bits concerning them, but it doesn't make sense from the showcased abilities of it. I mean, Megahex didn't know about Earth, so it couldn't have been probing Earth and copied the consciousnesses of Ryoma and Kaito, because Kaito is revived too in this movie, to possibly put in this greater consciousness, which would be called out when Megahex recreates their bodies as drones, if you're following me. Yeah, but for the... Michi, I think, is on his path to character redemption here. We saw a bit of that in the last episode of Gaim with Michi turning over a new leaf or trying to find a way to repent for his screw-ups, which I like. I mean, of the douchebag regular characters, he's probably the one that's most forgiving due to his intents were not inherently selfish. Okay, yeah, they were concerning Mai, they kind of were concerning the whole friend zone and crushing on her thing, but, you know, I think knowing that every choice he made screwed over all of his intents has made him more conscious, and we saw that in the last episode of Gaim. We see that here, that that experience is weighing on him and the choices he makes now, which I find a good thing, and he's endeavoring not to make the same mistakes. They're still his mistakes. He can still be called out on them, and I will when I get back to Gaim, but the fact that he wants to make up for them makes him probably the least warranted. No, that's not the phrase. He makes him the least bad of the... I'm not saying he's a bad character, but you get where I'm going with this. The likes of Masato Kusaka, or what's the real, you know, the douchebags of the writer series. That he's probably the least douchebag of the douchebags. I think that's a better way to phrase it. And yeah, he does a pretty good job fighting off the Kurokage troopers and other things Megahex sends against him here to kind of make up for it. That's another thing that is a plot hole for the Gaim portion. Megahex creates empty Roid Munes, or like numberless Roid Munes, mass production, basic Roid Munes. Right, like it's within a day of him arriving. Now, Due to the issues of the sync up with the drive portion, there's a problem here. At least 2 or 3 days isn't. If 2 or 3 days. Drive's portion occurs over like 2 or 3 days from the day-night shifts we see. Well, Gaim is not really showcased to have a day-night cycle in its portion, so it feels as if everything occurs over a single day from beginning to end on their portion. So there's an issue of the sync up since the numberless Roid Mutes thing is a kind of a notable plot hole. I guess if when Mitsuzane retreats to get his injuries treated, if night fell during that period of rest, I guess that would allow it to work, but it's not exactly showcased in there. Time is weird in tokusatsu, unless they're like really obsessive about dating stuff. You don't really exactly notice when day-night, you don't always notice how much time is passing. And this is especially a problem with Kamen Rider due to its system of arc storytelling, in that you're fighting the same creature over 2 to 3 episodes, depending on what show you're on. So, less time occurs than real time. Though that's mainly because, the episodes are being put out every 2 weeks. No, not 2 weeks. They're every week, but the story is being covered over the course of 2 weeks, and the story itself doesn't last over a period of 2 weeks. Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. So yeah, when Michi retreats, he manages to take one of the recreated Sengoku drivers with him, and due to warnings from Mai, who had been trapped by Megahex, they managed to get a spare Helheim fruit that, with the bells, they transform into a melon lock seed. The melon lock seed has to be the literal rarest of the various lock seeds that the Helheim generated, because simply due to, in the series, we only ever saw the melon lock seed used by Takatora. And it wasn't amongst the generic ones that Michi and Kaito and pretty much all of the beat writers had for their in-best battles. The other varieties, especially the Himawari one, the Sun Seed, whatever, I'm forgetting on the actual name of the seed. But yeah, all the other varieties of lock seeds were seen in common distribution, and the only ones that seemed ubiquitous, kind of hard to find, were the generic melon one. I say generic as, there's also the melon energy lock seed, and the energy lock seeds were explained by being Ryoma's creations, and I went over this. So yeah, it seemed really special that the last Helheim fruit Mai was able to create for them was the melon lock seed, which puts Melon Nissan back in action. Although I'm saying it's the last one she was able to create because at the time she was trapped and having her power being drained. How she's telling all this is actually a good use of her Woman of the Beginning power that was kind of not well explained, but, appearing in dreams, appearing as an apparition. And hey, this time, because she's not time traveling, she can actually tell relevant information and not be prevented from telling past selves of things because for some reason they didn't allow timey-wimey to happen. Well, timey-wimey was happening, but it wasn't affecting anything. Causality loops. Gotta hate them. Zangetsu versus Duke Dragon Arms. Yes. All of the yes. I think this is also a moment of redemption due to Michi versus Takatora in the late 30s, because there you saw that Zangetsu, just using the melon lock seed, was on the same tier, maybe a bit below the energy riders, simply from stats, but not just stats, but combat experience. This is something else I went over in the Gaim vlogs way back, of why Mitsuzane was such a worse user of the Melon Energy Lock Seed and the Shinzen Zetsu armor. It was mainly because of combat experience, and Ryoma is suffering from the same thing. He is very powerful. He has all these special skills for his Genesis driver, and his gear just got upgraded from symbiosis with, well, not symbiosis, but, amalgamation with Mega Hex, so he's stronger than ever. Problem is, Takatora has more combat experience than pretty much any of the other riders in this series. Let me rephrase. Combat experience while battling as a rider, because Yoko Minato would outclass even him on pure combat skill. In fact, it took 3 energy riders, actually, yeah, all 3 of the energy riders to take Takatora down, even when it was an ambush, due to that capability of his. So I kind of see this as a more fair fight, especially since base Zangetsu's capabilities weren't exactly addressed very much in the series. I mean, this is only the second time he uses his finishing move, to my knowledge. And pretty much starting off with throwing the melon shield at him, that was good to distract him so he could strike with the Muso Saber. You kind of have to see the sequence for it to make full sense, but yeah, and it ends with him +1 Genesis driver, which Michi returns the Melon Energy Lock Seed with him. Also good continuity, because though none of Mitsuzane's Lock Seeds were confiscated, even though the Genesis driver he was using was destroyed. So now we get Shin Zangetsu back. And I really did like before that sequence, well, actually not before, but interspaced with that face-off was Michi struggling to redeem him. Yeah, and this is going back to the Mitsuzane thing, but redeeming himself for screwing up with Mai by saving her from Mega Hex himself. And the resolve here, it's why I'm big on, not exactly big, but it's why I'm willing to let things not slide, but blanking on the term I want to use. I'm okay to just let him be, instead of bash on him incessantly. Which is rare because, oh god, there are so many bad characters in Tokusatsu these days. But yeah, from there they kind of get screwed over because Megahex figures out how to use the Kiwami Lock Seed left behind from Kota's death. He gets better. To integrate with himself and upgrade the entirety of the Megahex network due to that divine influence, because their people kind of got screwed over on their golden fruit of evolution due to cyberizing themselves. And then, so Shin Zangetsu and Ryugen have to fight him off, or since they can't actually defeat him on their own, especially with that power, they have to settle for a lesser goal, which is retrieving the Kiwami Lock Seed, which they do in another sequence that parallels an action Michi made previously, in that several times Michi was ordered or put in this situation to shoot someone in the back for the greater good, but the problem was, it wasn't actually the greater good, it was a betrayal. This is Takatora holding off Mega Hex so Ryugen can use his finishing move on him, and the context to him actually going through with it and his hesitation beforehand is really what mattered here, what we needed to see from Mitsuzane. And again, part of the symbolism of his redemption, in that how he hesitates when previously he would not have, or changed so he would not have. And when they retrieve it, it of course reveals Kota, when he was heavily injured, put all his divine power into the Kiwami lock so it would restore him as a backup. We're uncertain if Kota still has all his god powers, or if they're in a somewhat weakened form from this. But yeah, Kota's back, and the three riders just beat down Mega Hex. And then he reveals he can't, destroying the body doesn't exactly destroy Mega Hex. Which puts us over with Drive, and at least 2 or 3 days before these events, and him tracking down Lupin. And Lupin is a master thief from... I'm not sure if he's fictional or representative of a real historical figure that was never caught. I have no idea. And I really should look into that, because I really like Lupin III. The series by the manga artist Monkey Punch. I really like... I've mainly only seen the Funimation... Not Funimation, but the anime specials that have been released periodically throughout... I don't know since how long. I think there are at least 20 of them that did once a year, and... Point is, I really liked those when I saw them, so I'm kind of a passive fan of the franchise. So that I know it's not reflective of this Lupin, but, you know, it's kind of name recognition stuff, because he's supposed to be the extreme, supermassively competent thief, and it made sense since Drive is since Shinosuke is a detective foremost, that he would come into conflict with a notorious thief like that. And Lupin's entire goal is to steal the title of Kamen Rider. To which I look at him and laugh. Because, you can't exactly steal a title, you have to be worthy of it for someone to bestow it to you. I kind of like his, the explanation for his actions here, which I was missing from my Raw watch, in that everything Lupin did as a thief was to gain him immortality, either by some type of artifact or means, or just from notoriety that his name would never die. And then, of course, he gets immortality from using what Krim originally intended for himself. When he was preparing to fight the Roid Mutes before Krim was killed and put in a belt, he had originally intended to transfer himself into a modified Roid Mute body known as Cyberoid ZZZ, or 3Z. And he couldn't get it to work because he lacked the will or strength of personality to, which is why he transferred himself into the belt. From what we've been seeing later of, not later, most recently of Krim and his fear of the Roid Mutes despite fighting them, I can see that working, in that he didn't have the strength of spirits needed to fight them head-on himself. So that ends up working for me, simply from the better context the series gives Krim. Not so much from this movie itself. It's like, no, I couldn't use it, so I put it in storage. Why didn't you just decommission if you couldn't use it? Maybe recycle it or figure out why you couldn't use it. No, I didn't have the time, because the Roid Mutes killed me then. Then, since you were already a cybernetic consciousness, couldn't you just download your consciousness into it anyways? I don't know why you would think I could do that. Yeah, but yeah, Lupin giving them the runarounds, that makes sense from cops and robbers' perspective, especially with the pedigree that comes from using that name. So, the Lupin, of course, what's the phrase I should use? He decided that since he got immortality, he might as well use his... Since he's not a completely awful person, he's just a notorious criminal, you know, doesn't really believe in killing kind of thing. The romanticized view of a criminal, in that he's just a thief, he's not any of these other things. So he considers, just after getting the cyborg body, to become a hero himself. And then he saw Shinosuke and didn't see any of the underlying character stuff, and thought he was unworthy of being the hero fighting the Roidmutes. So he went after Shinosuke, partly as a challenge, partly to discredit him. And I really see that going either way, actually. Either become a challenge so Shinosuke would become the hero that he thinks should bear the title of Kamen Rider, or he'll take it for himself. Problem is, another reason Krim didn't use Sephiroth ZZZ was it apparently twists the consciousness into more extreme character aspects. So pretty much instead of doing the straight up challenge to X after getting their attention, he kind of like starts going not exactly on a killing spree, but a crime spree. So it's not like one incident to get their attention and then all these other hoops and hurdles to be proven worthy. It's committing real acts, I guess. The Roidmute forces aren't happy with this either, because it's, to them, abusing the body of one of their comrades. And so they send in Chase, who at this point in the timeline was still Machine Chaser, the Shinigami of the Roidmute forces that resets them, to reset the body of Cyberoid 3Z. And it ends up culminating in a odd but appreciated team-up of the two that would foreshadow some later events, and technically a few preceding ones, considering the character build-up for Chase. Kamen Rider Lupin himself, though, you know, his rider form, that one's a bit interesting for me, because, well, I own Kamen Rider Batch Ride War 2, and in that movie, the ultimate... not movie, in that video game, the ultimate villain is an entity called Cinema. Cinema has, I forget the complete backstory, but essentially he has two kids with him, and are collectively... they're collectively making the writers reenact the events from both their shows and especially their movies. Pretty much their starring movies and not so much the team-ups. With exception to the Sengoku Movie War, because that was the only one that had come out at that point for Gain. And I'm bringing him up because, character design-wise, Lupin is using a bunch of gear that is aesthetically similar to what was designed for Cinema. I don't know if Cinema was actually constructed as a real, you know, like a promotional tour thing at all, that they were just recycling parts, but it's an interesting allusion to design-wise, and I think that allusion, that symbol, that I'm blanking on the term I want to use again. Those common design elements make for an interesting illusion, especially since Lupin has the ability to create and manipulate film strips, and like putting up a line of them to either trap an enemy or pull something out of the film, which is how he creates dummy Roidmutes. Once more, they're the numberless generic ones that don't even have Roidmute cores. And it's odd because, you know, we have Megahex doing the exact same thing a town over, and Megahex's use of it is not explained, but Lupin's is. So maybe during the day passing, if there is a second day in Megahex's invasion, maybe they crossed paths or something. I don't know. Because they do cross paths at the end of Drive's portion. But getting back to that, it's actually kind of, not exactly clever, but it's an interesting twist at the end of it that Lupin's plots had been using information gathered by Lupin himself disguised as Kiriko. Now, the problem I have with this is that it's not really noticeable in the movie when the switch occurs. They try and slot out a specific time point where Shinosuke experiences a slowdown, but nothing occurs around it, which is when the switch is supposed to occur, but there's not exactly enough time passing in the slowdown moment, because they can still perceive time normally when slowdown is affecting them, for the individual calling himself Lupin to... Okay, I've just remembered his name. The Lupin in this movie is actually a guy called Zoruku Tojo, who's taken the identity for himself or something. It's been a long day. But yeah, the moment where they switch out of and assuming Kiriko's identity thing, it's not exactly well placed. It makes sense in hindsight, but it's not exactly something that's very obvious for a... It's not obvious from first watching. You see it in replay, but you still miss it because it's not exactly... What's the phrase? I don't want to say it's not obvious, but it's like, it's not even a blink and you miss it moment. It's like there's no distinction between when Kiriko was placed by Lupin and when she wasn't, aside from one moment where she smiled. Now, I guess that's the point of it, that Lupin is so good at this that you couldn't notice his deception unless there was something really personal that, by not knowing her character, you wouldn't catch. And with the Kiriko replacement, Shinosuke noted that she smiled freely, which Kiriko does not do. It's like, only when someone is deserving of praise do you really see that kind of expression from her. Which, admittedly, having watched through episode 33 of Gain by this point, you see her smile a lot more as the show goes on. So, going back to this in hindsight, you forgot that this was a thing in the show because it was never something stressed. It was like a throwaway gag. So, it makes sense, but it's being built off of something that we forgot was even a thing. Yeah, I think that works. Before they figure out that Kiriko had been replaced and Lupin is still beating them down, both intellect-wise and in combat, Krim gets damaged and seems to die. He's not. There's signs that he's still functioning in there, but the driver that's holding him is damaged, and Rina doesn't really seem to do anything to fix it. Now, the really stupid thing about this part, which makes me, still think of the drive portion as the weak part of the movie, weaker part of the movie than Gimes, is Shinosuke ends up falling to his death while chasing after Lupin, who'd been threatening to destroy a building, and Krim is damaged. So Shinosuke and the shift cars wake him up and repair him by the shift cars forming a circle around Shinosuke while he tries to start the belt, and that apparently restores the entire thing from its damaged state. I call bullshit on this for two reasons. One, you don't fix damaged electronics by infusing them with power. That usually breaks them worse. And, all of the drive gear stuff is based on technology, made-up science, and, mindset. So, there's nothing in the series that would allow them to fix a broken driver just by willpower alone. And second, when Shinosuke's falling from such a high height to his death, and he manages to transform, one of the big issues with Gaim everybody calls out is the death of Yoko Minato. And Yoko fell from a higher distance than Shinosuke and landed badly on the ground. We assume it happened to her in her rider form the entire time, because she was pretty much immaculate when they found her, and she died after having hit the ground. Fell and hit the ground in rider form, then de-transformed. It's all internal damage. There is no going of splat. Drive transforms and falls this distance, and there is no injury to him, and that's pretty much what that's my big call-out moments. Now, there are mitigating factors. Shinosuke was being supported by the shift cars. Shinosuke was able to control his fall so he could deaden the impact, especially from within the rider suit, and Yoko's was what caused her to fall was a massive explosion that may have damaged her rider suit. We still call bullcrap on it because her rider form was an energy rider form, a second stage rider for that show. She was one of the strongest riders in the show, and it's still a bad, ignoble death, especially in the context that, with the exception of 2, technically 3 female riders, are the only ones to live out of, I don't think we've even hit 10 yet. We're close to 10 at least, but yeah, it's building a bad context that the protagonist survives this because he's a protagonist, but the secondary character falls from a less lethal distance and still dies. It's calling bullcrap across the series, especially if you were a big Gaim fan. Something else that I think could have helped mitigate this moment is Rina actually repairing the driver so it works correctly, and it's just Krim or the systems holding Krim's consciousness that are still damaged beyond that. So it looks like it's back to normal, but it's not until Shinosuke tries to wake him up and use the powers of drive and all the shift cars come together that they actually start Krim back up from the infusion of power and all that. It could have mitigated things better, in my opinion, than just having a speech and the will to keep moving forward to get him out of this. So, yeah, it's actually fix the damn thing before you try and do it with heart. Yes. And yeah, Drive runs through all his forms to beat down Lupin, who'd beaten him up already, and it ends with type speed using the max flare tire and Trideron driven by Kiriko to do a variation of his speed drop, bouncing against rider on rider kick to. I really like that rider kick because it seems effective no matter the enemy they're facing, because it's just bouncing him to multi-kick them, and I like the idea of the multi-kick rider kick. It's why I'm a big fan of Axel Trial form from Double. All the lesser kicks lead to a huge explosion that ignores armor. But yeah, Lupin's impressed that he was able to surpass him. And there's kind of a joyous moment that the one he thought was inferior to himself actually managed to show him up. So there was kind of what would it be if Russ would say it? It was all seeming to be in a good-natured spat between them, I guess. Of course, this is when Meghex finds the Cyberoid Triple Z body and upgrades himself, apparently. And this upgrade, I don't get why they're doing the evolution through this kind of route thing, because It's really the Cyberoid Triple Z integration to Megahex Triple Z that kind of screws them over, as then Megahex's consciousness, the collective will, in this upgrade takes the form of a Roidmute core, which at the end of the day, Drive and Gaim are able to destroy because instead of being immortal through copies and a remote consciousness, it becomes centralized, which leads to its destruction. I guess that's the hubris of Triple Z's form of evolution. They want to keep advancing and absorbing things into this amalgamation, but when you put everything into this herald meant to beat down your enemies, you end up creating the connection that can kill you. It's kind of comparable to the Borg Queen from Star Trek, in that, well, the Borg Queen was a good idea initially, in that it was a moderator that directed the collective consciousness of the Borg to their most efficient task. It eventually became where all the hive minds dead end. You disconnect the Queen that's in charge, you sever her from the system, and it breaks the order and turns it to chaos. I think that makes sense. So, that was the big mistake. I do both like and dislike the Drive and Gaim team-up portions. It's like, they gave a few moments in this section of the movie for Shinosuke and Kota to interact and pretty much give the basis of their abilities and their powers. I really like the, oh, I'm a space god, I think, bit between them, because then Shinosuke is calling him a god throughout this entire time, and he's kind of, rolling with the punches there, and I liked that kind of interaction. I also like this kind of interaction when I watched it in Movie War Core. It's pretty much the same thing as Eiji and Shotaro were doing in the Movie War Core team-up in 2011. And yeah, Riku Sanjo was on that one as well, so I guess that makes a bit of sense, but it's not as good a team-up as Mega Max, where you kind of saw multiple interactions and how multiple writers played off of each other. Not just Eiji and Gentaro in that one, but also Eiji, Gentaro, and Shotaro, and also them briefly interacting with the Showa writers, and as in the Legendary 7 Showa writers. So there was, more interactions, more showcasing of their awesome, that made it probably still the best versus writer team-up movie. And you also, it's not as, the other problem is it's not as palpable as the one from last year, the Great Sengoku Movie War. That had a much longer interaction between Haruto and Kota that helped inform a lot of things between them. A kind of passing the torch moment, so to speak. Reaffirming that he's on the right path. And while we do get that here with the Gaim writers telling Megahex Triple Z why humanity is going to resist and win against them and is beyond its comprehension in this growing from individuals teaming up, giving a stronger strength than subjugated amalgamation. It feels like Shinosuke is kind of a accessory to it. So he's not, it's like he's overhearing this and learning it, but he's not being an active participant, which we got from the Sengoku Movie War. And yeah, well, he's not a participant in the rest of it, but when you needed him to be active in the banter against Megahex, he was kind of just standing back. Something I did like from the team-up portion of the movie is the Roidmute generals, Heart, Brain, and as well as Chase, also joined in on this, because they're also on this individuality thing. They're pushing their own evolution, but not by amalgamation, it's by individuality, by mastering central concepts of themselves. So, which would be lost if they were to be put back in the bottle, so to speak, by Megahex's absorption. So there's a logical reason why they would team up with their enemies here and just pretty much be left alone to leave afterwards because they helped. And that's, I think this is a much better justification than Tokuger versus Kyoryuger, where, you know, the Shadow Line are barely present in the movie over the threats of deboss his creator, which ends up being lackluster, and then they show up for the final act. So it seems like, why was the Shadow Line even involved in this conflict in the first place? There's a lot of it in that movie. And they even bring Kaito back at this point, trying to think that this can be another challenge against the one that's beating them, because he was a great challenge before. Problem is, Kaito's thing has always been the strength of the individual, so it kind of almost immediately backfires him. He recreates Kaito, and then he gets slapped in the face by the banana spear. That, and double entendre, god damn it. I need to stop saying, So yeah, Kaito's back for the battle, but once they kill Megahex Triple Z, all the Megahex created cyborgs and robots kind of slump over and stop operating because they're no longer connected to this network that allowed them to do stuff. Now, Kaito was an asshole, but it was a good way to see him back, in that it was cohesive with his philosophy and made sense for the character why he would do the backstab immediately as he was brought back. I was kind of expecting something sort of pseudo-spiritual due to the last episode of Gaim, where Kaito appears as a spirit briefly, implying his Overlord evolution allowed him to exist on as a spirit-protecting benign Helheim fruit, because the show had already addressed before that some Helheim fruit had fallen to Earth, and not exactly fallen to Earth, but not turned into the mutation fruit. That's how they created the first crack, at the very least. So yeah, big team up. It's okay. The fight scenes play off of each other pretty well. There's nothing that big to complain about, except until we get to Type Fruits and Drive Arms, which is the movie-exclusive forms for the starring writers based on the Legend Rider Lock Seeds from the Gaim line, and then a shift car that allows Drive to take on the power sets of Gaim Orange Arms. They come completely out of nowhere. The build-up, introduction, and utilization for them do not work with the rest of the narrative. It is a very blatant toy cell thing for the movie-exclusive item. Even if you do the whole roads where we're going, we don't need roads thing to try to run with the the kind of evolution invoked by Type Fruits, it pretty much just turns its wheels down like the DeLorean allows it to fly into space. But that entire sequence, it's stupid. It's very, very stupid because it doesn't work with the rest of the movie. It's eventually how they do destroy Megahex by flying after the Megahex core that's been created and pretty much pile drive into the planet to blow up that core, but it's still No. No. At least there's a good coda to it, like, them talking, Shinosuke and Kota properly introducing themselves out of battle once it's all dealt with and going their separate ways. That's a pretty good passing the torch moment in place of, learning something from the previous writer and having better interaction. So it's not bad, and overall the greater movie is good. It's just the team-up portion where it fails, and of course logical hiccups throughout. Where would I rank it? Okay, every one of the movie wars has something good in it. Decade, I thought the writer war stuff in that one was pretty good, and the Begins Night portion of Movie War 2010 is good, very good prequel stuff for Double. Core has post-series epilogue for Double, the second one to do that. That leads into the Double Returns V Cinemas. Oz's portion of that is crap, but the Core team up kind of fixes things a bit with having a bit better interaction, and the trinkets making for a pretty interesting villain there. Megamax, as I said, is awesome. Forza and Wizard is another problematic one, simply because of the stupidity of who they got to write. Wizard's portion and the team up in that one are probably still the worst team up from these movies. So, and of course, Sengoku Movie War is great, a great coda for Wizard, and it's just a generic one-shot for Gaim. Which, now that we know the full context of Gaim and the priestess thing that prompted Bujin Gaim in the first place, it makes more sense now after the series is concluded when it didn't beforehand. Though it kind of foreshadows issues we had in this film. The actual team-up battle is bad. The movie-exclusive armaments are introduced horribly, and the villain is beaten both too easily and with too much difficulty. So, I think now that I've seen the full movie with the subtitles, I'd probably place it either third or fourth. That's just my personal preference. Possibly second, but I'm usually a person that doesn't lock in rankings like that. It's usually I'm better receiving something I've seen recently. I'm worse receiving something I've seen recently if it was actually bad. But as I get more information about it in my head, I can reevaluate things. I still think Megamax is the best team up. I still think the Sengoku Movie War has the best team up writer interaction. Sengoku Movie War is not my second in that, though. That's still 2010, just my personal opinion for what it adds to the shows it's relating to. Or is it... No, even that's not consistent. Megamax is first, then the rest get shuffled, Ultimatum last. Yeah. Probably not going to have one of these movie-ish vlogs, because the next one that's supposed to be released relating to these is, oh, right, the Gaim Guidance. I have no idea if anybody's subbed that yet. I really need to look to see that, because I've seen them raw. I liked them, but yeah, you're probably not going to see a not recapping the show stuff for a while yet. Yeah, that's all I got. So, see you all later.